Good evening. Welcome to our Great Oaks Wednesday evening Bible class. Thank you for joining us, either here in person or online with us. We're so glad that you did. Looking forward to a great lesson here in the auditorium tonight. There are a few other classes in places, but we're live streaming the class here. Joe Ford will be our teacher tonight, so we look forward to that. We do have a few announcements I want to go through. They were in the email that went out earlier today, so if you haven't seen that, we just have a few announcements. Susan Yon passed away this morning. Let's keep Jean and the families in our prayers. The arrangements are forthcoming. Let's lift up in prayer of thanksgiving for Jennifer Williams as she will ring the bell tomorrow for mark her 30th and final radiation treatment. So let's keep Jennifer in our prayers. Gary Reeves is going to have surgery for a small hernia and does ask for our prayers for that. We're also in need of some writers to help with our upcoming 40 days of prayer. The directions are on the website, so you can go to the website and see those, and the printed copies are in the foyer here in the building. We have a deadline on October 14th, so this is kind of a short deadline, so if you can, help us out with that. This time we will go have a word of prayer, and then we'll begin our class. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity we can come here and study your word, and we just pray for Joe as he leads the class here, as you will give him the recollection of the things he studied. Help us to have an open reception of what he teaches, and that we can better understand your word and serve you better. Father, we pray for those that have lost loved ones, that are sick. We just pray that you will heal them and comfort them in a way only you can. Father, go with us throughout this week. Continue to keep us safe from the virus. We just pray that you will allow the virus to go away and things to get closer to normal. Father, go with us throughout this week. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Good evening. You hear me in the back? Not too loud, not too soft. All right. Well, I want to let you know I've already been challenged tonight. When Steve gave me the microphone, I put the little thing on my belt and I put this thing in my pocket. So let's hope that's not a harbinger of things to come. All right. We'll be in Luke 15 tonight. For those of you joining us online, welcome. We're glad you're able to be with us tonight. Those in the auditorium, glad you're here also. You know, a number of years ago, I was in this auditorium class every Sunday morning, and I actually believe that at that time I reduced the average age of the auditorium class. And now I've increased the average age of the auditorium class. I don't know whether to apologize or be grateful, so I guess I'll just be grateful tonight. All right, we're in Luke 15. Uh-oh. Here we go. Here's an outline for tonight. We're going to spend a lot of time on the first two points, the parables and the audience, because I think we really do need to understand some things up front before we actually get to the parable of the prodigal son. In my presentation, I may refer, there's actually three different stories in Luke 15, the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son or prodigal son. However, my version of Luke 15 indicates it's actually one parable. So it probably is one parable with three different stories to it. I may refer to it as three different parables, but understand that, you know, you can either accept it as one parable or three different stories, whatever works for you. Anyway, we'll be talking about the first 2 points, and in the end, we'll talk about the significance and application of the parable. All right, what do you think the meaning of the word prodigal is? Common answers are rebellious or a runaway. What are some of your answers? Wasteful. For some reason, I always thought prodigal meant lost. I was wrong, obviously. Word prodigal means wastefully extravagant, lavish, unrestrained. So you ask, who is the prodigal in this parable, in this story? Of course, we know tradition assigns the prodigal to the lost son. However, some people, some commentators really believe that the word describes the father more than the son for his extravagant love. And I don't know if this would really mean anything. However, father is in 12 of the 22 verses with regard to the prodigal son. And I counted those twice, but that's no guarantee that I got it right. What is a parable? It's a short story, basically what it is. It's used to, it's told to help people understand a principle. In the Greek, it means to set beside, and in English, it means to compare, a comparison. Jewish culture, things were explained in word pictures. Jesus taught in parables because, number one, he was the master teacher. That's why he used parables. They were difficult principles that he explained, or he used to make them easier to understand. They contained symbolism. They were rich in symbolism. They were easy to remember. It was a common teaching style during that period of time. And it allowed Jesus to teach controversial ideas. Now, as we get to the parable of the prodigal son, the lost son, we're going to find out that this was a controversial story that Jesus was telling. And we'll get to that as we go along. And the last one, Jesus came to show us God, not to teach us rules. Actually, these three stories, Jesus is sort of lifting the curtain a little bit to see what God is like. So we get a little peek at the character of God. Of course, these three parables all have to do with showing us the seeking nature of God. Jesus is, of course, remember that Jesus is responding to the criticism of the Pharisees. That's why he's telling this one parable or three different stories. He was not criticizing them directly. Of course, they wouldn't have wanted to have heard that, but he was telling them a story, hoping that they could see themselves. Subject matter of parables. The general theme is the kingdom of heaven. In Matthew 13:44, we read, the kingdom of God is like a treasure hidden in a field. And in Luke 14, we read about the parable of the guest and the parable of the dinner. But the general theme is the kingdom of heaven. And in this case tonight, the sub-theme would be the character of the Father, the lost sheep, coin, and son. What I'm going to try to do, and not run off the rails tonight, is to avoid the two extremes. Number one, trying to find a spiritual truth in every detail, which would be too broad a stroke. And number two, saying there's only one spiritual truth in each of the parables. That would be too narrow. Purpose of the parables is not to settle issues, but to challenge us to think more deeply about the issues. Of course, in this, the lost son parable, especially with regard to the older brother, Jesus was challenging the Pharisees to look at themselves and then to recognize that God was seeking them. We need to look for the central truth in every parable. And of course, Jesus was teaching the parables to the truth seekers, not so much the curiosity seekers. There was a difference back then. Parables of Jesus oftentimes remained a mystery because the people listening to the parables had a hard heart. They could not understand or refused to understand. Of course, all three stories in Luke 15 deal with compassion. They reveal that God is searching. He's a searching Father. He's looking for the lost. He's seeking them and rejoices when they are found. In all three stories in Luke 15, there was rejoicing. In all three stories, the joy was shared with others. Teaching in parables was effective. As we said earlier, there were word pictures. Jesus was speaking in a language that everyone could understand. And of course, his emphasis was on attitudes rather than the outward appearances that the Pharisees were always concerned about and focused on. Parables also, of course, had an emotional impact, especially with those with soft hearts. Parables of Jesus sometimes remained a mystery. It required the listeners of the story to put themselves in the story. And sometimes that was hard for them if they were not seeking the truth. The result were the Pharisees were ever hearing but never understanding, be ever seeing but never perceiving. And we obviously don't want to be in that category. One of the advantages of preparing a lesson like this, it gives you the opportunity, or it gives you the incentive, motivation to get into the story, the parable, a little bit more than you've had done in the past, or at least for me. And I don't know how many times I've read these stories of Luke 15, a lot. However, I really did not see myself in this parable. And maybe I wasn't thinking deeply enough. I guess maybe that was part of it. However, the more I studied, the more I saw myself in this parable. And it was, I was stepping on my own toes preparing this lesson. I'm not going to step on your toes tonight. However, if you need to step on your own toes, you can be like me and go ahead and step on them. All right. But there were some deep thoughts on this parable that I really had not considered before. So it made me focus, which I needed to do. Now, Revis, I forgot to tell you we're having a quiz tonight.
Oh, boy.
However, there's 3 quizzes tonight, Revis, 3. However, since I knew you would be here, I wanted to give you a 50-50 shot at getting them right. So they're true or false.
I appreciate it.
You can have 3 lifelines to Ruth. I don't think you'll need them, but if you do, feel free to use them. And Ruth, if he uses more than 3, please raise your hand and let me know. All right, number 1, Jesus told the 3 parables, or the one parable, 3 stories in Luke 15 to trick the Pharisees. False? He wasn't tricking them. He was teaching them, right? He was not tricking the Pharisees. He was just trying to teach them. Revis, you're 1 for 1. Keep up the good work. Number 2. Number 2, the Pharisees were upset with Jesus for teaching the sinners. That is false. The Pharisees loved it when Jesus would bring the hammer down on the sinners, or at least what they thought he was going to do or to teach them. They were concerned, as we'll talk about a little bit later, they were upset because Jesus was associating with the sinners, keeping company with them, not so much teaching them, because the Pharisees wanted the sinners to know they were lost. That's what the Pharisees wanted. Number 3, Jesus knew the Pharisees were interested in hearing the truth. You know, when you're a teacher and you give a test and half the class misses the question, or more than half the class misses the question, you know you've had a bad question. We've got good students in here, I know, good Bible students in here. That could go either way, all right? Jesus was telling the Pharisees the truth. I don't know how interested they were. Some of them probably were interested in hearing the truth. Some were not. 4, parables of Jesus oftentimes remained a mystery to those with a hardened heart. What do you think, Revis? It's all right, Ruth, you can help him. Yeah, true. If you had a hardened heart, you may not want to hear or understand the parable. Number 5, and we're going to talk about tax collectors in just a minute, but number 5, the tax collectors were Roman citizens who extorted the Jews.
Still going on today.
Read that question carefully.
No, they weren't wrong.
All right. They were Jews. They were Jews extorting their own people, right? And we'll talk about tax collectors in just a minute. I'm not going to mark that against you, Revis. You're still good. Number 6, religious leaders thought tax collectors and sinners were spiritually untouchable. True. Yes.
I know they hated them.
They hated them. They did everything they could to not be with them. There was a barrier, a big barrier. So yes, they were spiritually untouchable. All right. You know, you have to ask the question, why did they want to kill Jesus? Well, there are a number of reasons, I suppose. He healed the sick. He raised the dead. He went about doing good things, right? So why would you want to kill a good man like this? Well, Jesus came to change the world. And people get angry when changes are made, when power is taken from them, they can become aggressive. In Luke 15, deep down, when you look at it, the Pharisees and the teachers would not be happy with Jesus on these 3 stories. Would not be happy about it. So they would likely seek to kill him. All right. Oh, let's talk about. Let's read the first 2 verses, Luke 15. Now all the tax collectors and the sinners were coming near him to listen to him. Both the Pharisees and the scribes began to grumble, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." All right, that's pretty straightforward. Of course, this parable is probably one of the most famous in the New Testament. It talks about the destructive nature of sin. Talks about the love of God the Father. And it tells us about the joy of reconciliation. So this is probably one of the favorite parables that for some people. Now, keep in mind, at this time, Rome, the Romans, ruled the world. Okay? They had a very large territory. It was very difficult to govern this large territory. So they ruled and governed with a very large army. How do you pay for a very large army? Taxation. It's the only way you can do it. Taxes. So, the Jews were tax collectors for the Roman government. A very despised position by the Jews. Think about it. The Jews were, the Jewish tax collectors were collecting from their own people so the Romans could oppress them. Think about that. Even if the tax collector was honest, and probably most were not, even if the tax collector was honest and not charging them more taxes than they should have, they would still be outcast because they were enabling the Roman government to oppress their own people. I don't think we have anything in our culture today that we could compare to the tax collectors. All right, what were the Pharisees grumbling about?
If he's so good, why is he associating with tax collectors and thieves?
Exactly. Now, the Pharisees knew that Jesus knew the law and probably knew it in their mind equal to them. The outcast, the sinners, were untouchable. They were told they were outcast. It was over for them. There's no way for them to get back in. And of course, what happens? Jesus shows up and gives them hope. Well, that goes against what the Pharisees were about. Travis, I'm going to let you be my conscience on this slide. If I would have gone to the church directory and photoshopped some random pictures and put them on this slide, would that have been good? All right, the question is, if I would have gone to the church directory and pulled out some random pictures of members here and put them on the faces on this slide, would that have been a good idea?
Well, we'd have been much more familiar with the picture.
Yes. However, if I was sitting in the pew and this slide came up and my picture of my face was on one of these three guys, I probably wouldn't have been too happy, all right? Probably not, because I don't want to be associated with how the Pharisees were grumbling. So they were grumbling, all right? They didn't like this. All right, now, going back to Luke 14, this is sort of a lead-in to our three stories here. And Jesus, in the latter part of Luke 14, he was making a demand for his followers to be wholehearted if they wanted to follow him. And of course, the last words in Luke 14, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Also, in Luke 14, there's the parable of the guest. Verse 13, but when you give a reception, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Parable of the dinner, Luke 14, verse 21. Go out at once into the streets of the city and bring in the poor, the crippled, and blind, and lame. Jesus was setting the table, basically. He wanted the outcast. Obviously, the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind would be outcast in that culture. All right, Jesus was teaching the sinners. Pharisees thought that was okay because they knew they were righteous. They had their act down, right? In their mind, they did. But they knew Jesus was knowledgeable and with the Scriptures, and they didn't think he should be eating or associating with them. I like it in verse first three verses. Verse 2. This man receives sinners and eats with them. Is that a true statement? Yeah, that's true. He did eat with the tax collectors and sinners. And of course, at some other level, they were making an accusation that, in their mind, that he should not have been. All right, in the eyes of the Pharisees, Jesus is guilty. Not only is he violating their law, he's violating social norms. And ironically, they didn't understand this, but when Jesus said that he was eating with the sinners, they told the good news because that's what Jesus came to do. Of course, eating with sinners in that day indicates a relationship and an acceptance. So Jesus is on their side, the side of the sinners. Pharisees really might have difficulty understanding that. So Jesus was turning their world, upside down. They saw themselves as being the elite and the sinners as trash. And of course, Jesus is trying to, obviously he's in the parable of the lost son, he's encouraging the sinners that God is concerned with them and wants to find them. And of course, Jesus in the parable wanted to make it clear that the Pharisees thought they were close to God, but actually the sinners and the tax collectors were the ones God was seeking. Of course, that would not set well with the Pharisees. And of course, he didn't tell them that outright. He told them in the parable. And of course, we see a repeat of this message in Luke 18 when Jesus is teaching on attitudes of prayer. In Matthew 23, I'm sure you're familiar with this chapter. Jesus has harsh words for the Pharisees. In fact, he gives 8 woes to the scribes, Pharisees, and calls them hypocrites. He calls them blind guides, fools, whitewashed tombs, serpents, and brood of vipers. Obviously, not being very complimentary, but Jesus was telling the truth. All right, Jesus, why are you hanging around the wrong people? That's what the Pharisees would have thought. Jesus, come on over here with us. We're the elite. Quit associating with the sinners. And of course, his mercy attracted the sinners and the outcast. Jesus was offering the sinners and the outcast something that no one else was offering, and that was acceptance. And of course, Pharisees didn't like that. They did not accept the sinners. They didn't want Jesus to accept the sinners. God just got a little too easily available in the Pharisees' eyes. Verse 12. Oh, one other thing before we move on. The Pharisees gave people who did not keep the law a name or a classification. They called them people of the land. That's what they called them. I guess that's not a bad term, but anyway, they treated them, the Pharisees treated the sinners like they were untouchable. And of course, the reason the Pharisees, they said when a man is one of the people of the land, don't trust money to him, don't take testimony from him, do not appoint him a guardian, do not make him custodian of charitable funds, do not accompany him on a journey. So it was a tall wall between the Pharisees and the sinners. All right, verse 12. We're getting back to the parable. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me." So he divided his wealth between them. All right. Younger son comes in. He wants his share, and he wants it now. He wanted to be independent of his father. And I suppose at some age, we all want to be independent at some age. Of course, he was looking for the self-indulgent activities to make him happy. It was not usual for a son to ask for his inheritance prior to the father's death. That was not normal. However, in this case, the son did. And keep in mind, the Jewish culture was a shame-honor proposition. You tried to avoid shame, and you tried to seek honor. Well, in this case, with the younger son asking for his share, that would have been a dishonor to his, or a shame to his family. Prodigal love. The father gave the son his share of the inheritance. Did the father have to give the son, the younger son, his share? Was he obligated to? No, he was not. But he had that extravagant love. He loved him too much not to let him go. Of course, the younger son, he gets what he's asked for, but he's also going to get what's coming to him a little bit later. Any questions or comments up to this point? All right, did the younger son know he had broken his father's heart, you think, at that point in time? No. Too selfish, right? Way too selfish to understand that he had broken his father's heart. And the question we ask, do we know when we break God's heart? Verse 13. Not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country, and there he squandered his estate with loose living. The son is in a state of rebellion, not necessarily a geographical place, but a state of rebellion. He's got a bad heart condition, and not one that the cardiologist can fix. He may have totally rejected his father, or he may have been just focused on his own fun. We all have tendencies to want to leave the Father and dwell in the land of self-will. Well, the land of self-will, it's not a bad place to be if you're seeking fun, right? If you're seeking the right thing to do, not a good place to be. All right, the son packed up in a hurry, said a few days, and in verse 13, he gathered up everything. Most of us don't pack up and move immediately. We do little things. We change in little ways. Our relationships change. Our hearts changed. Sometimes we think that small decisions will not have major impacts in our direction and our attitudes. Success, position, recognition, accumulation, we can use good things for the wrong reason. The thing that mattered to the younger son, what he wanted and when he wanted it. He was in charge. Verse 14. Now when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. The only thing the far country had in store for him was reality apart from his father. After he spent his money, let's say it went downhill quickly. He got hungry. He had to surrender his dignity and his freedom. He wanted to be free, so he left his father's house, and now he was no longer free. He had nothing to show for it. Free will allow us to make bad decisions, but doesn't allow us to choose the consequences of those decisions. Not a pretty picture. All right, time to look for a job. Spend his money. Well, guess what? He didn't get that executive job, working in the pig pen. I've never had to work with pigs before, but probably wouldn't be too pleasant. In the Jewish culture, associating with pigs, the lowest of the low. Verse 17, but when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, but I am dying here with hunger? He got some clarity, didn't he? He hit rock bottom. Now, just because you hit rock bottom doesn't mean you'll stop digging. It does. Being in a far country does not necessarily mean total rejection. Does not mean that. It could mean you have an issue with pride. It could mean you're drifting a bit. You haven't gone to the far country, but of course it gets back to heart and attitude. And that could be a far country. Even though you're not in total rebellion, you could still be in a far country. All right, so clarity. Why am I living this way? A good question to ask at that point. Of course, being hungry will cause that moment of clarity. I'm going to have to run now. He was running on empty pockets, empty stomach, empty soul. He decided to go home. Notice he's coming back empty-handed. He has nothing to offer his father. He has spent his inheritance and brought shame to himself and his family. All right, verses 18 through 24, this is where the story gets real good. The younger son decides to go back. He rehearses what he's going to say to his father. He's messed up badly. Doesn't expect to be welcomed back as a son. He's only going to ask to be a servant. It's a large space between give me my money and slinking back home. It's a large space there. Can he make restitution? He doesn't know. He's willing to make restitution. His father will not allow it. The father spots him a long way away. He had not given up hope. What is shocking? Oh yeah, the father had been looking for his son on the horizon, but the father actually gets up and runs to meet his son. It was considered undignified for a man to run. And Revis, when's the last time you've run? Been a while. So Revis is officially classified as dignified, all right? When the son gets back to his father, father will not even allow him to finish his speech, his words. Within the first minute, his son, or the father, has accepted him and given him unconditional love. Notice the father's attitude. No anger, no I told you so, no reprimand, no rejection. All right, last quiz. The younger son had brought shame to his family. True. The Pharisees thought the younger son should be punished when he came home. True. Pharisees wanted justice, not mercy. 3, the younger son was concerned he may not be accepted by his father when he returned home. That probably is true. The younger son's friends in the faraway country came to his rescue. False. They were nowhere to be found. The younger son went from rags to riches when he came back home. He did. All right. Luke 15, 25 through 32. Jesus was telling the parable of the prodigal son, and actually there's two prodigal sons in this story, in the parable. The first son gets lost in a land far away, and the second son gets lost at home. The older brother returns to a party after the younger son is reunited. He's confused, he is shocked. What is going on? Things are out of control. It's interesting to see he only asked or accused his father of, you've never given me a young goat. He was willing to settle for something that small when the father had much more to offer. The older brother missed the compassion and forgiveness of the father's heart. And he wanted to wallow in self-pity rather than join the party. The Sunday school teacher had finished the lesson, the prodigal son, and she asked her class if there was anyone unhappy in the parable. One of her best students, a little girl, raised her hand and replied, "The fattened calf." So there can be more than one right answer to the question. Yeah. All right, younger brother. This is a quote. Do I have 2 more minutes? This was a quote from Timothy Keller about the elder brother doesn't go to God because he doesn't know he's sick. Elder brother syndrome. You become angry when you don't get your way. You live out of compliance. We're going to skip this last quiz so I can contrast the younger son, the older brother. Younger son left the family. He was carefree, rebellious, seeking adventure. He understood grace upon his return. The older son was loyal to the family, risk-adverse, rule follower, people pleaser, but did not understand grace. Similarities. Ooh. Similarities. They chose a different way to be alienated. They had heart issues. They wanted control. All right, let's get to the application so we can get y'all home. Sin will take you further than you intend to go. It will keep you longer than you expect to stay, and it will cost you more than you want to pay. Let's try to see grace through the Father's eyes. Jesus welcomes sinners, whether you are the younger brother or older brother, come home. God is waiting for you. He'll forgive you, will restore you. God never gives up and will rejoice when you come home. Thank you for being here tonight. You have a good evening.